In the small town of Prescott, Arizona, the summer of 1985 was warm and quiet, like many before it. People went about their daily lives, children played outside until the sun dipped below the horizon, and the local police force kept the peace. Among these officers was Daniel Mercer, a man well known and respected by everyone in the town. He was not just a cop, but a devoted husband and a loving father to his little boy James. Daniel had served the community faithfully for over a decade, always putting his duty first but never forgetting his family. On a clear July evening, Daniel woke up early and prepared for his shift. His wife Linda was still in bed, and his son James was just waking up, rubbing his eyes. Daniel smiled warmly and bent down to give James a gentle hug. "Be good for Mommy today," he said softly. James smiled back, not fully understanding that this would be one of the last times he would see his father for many years. Daniel kissed Linda goodbye at the door, promising to be back soon. The weight of the world seemed light in those moments of love and family, but what no one knew was that this ordinary night would change their lives forever. Daniel was assigned to patrol a vast stretch of the Arizona high desert, a rugged and wild area filled with canyons, rocky cliffs, and dry riverbeds. The place was beautiful but dangerous, especially at night. The desert could be unforgiving, with its sudden drops and hidden trails. As the sun set and the stars began to appear, Daniel climbed into his patrol car, a sturdy, reliable vehicle that had been with him through many difficult moments. His radio crackled occasionally with messages from dispatch, but everything seemed normal. But then something strange happened. Daniel never returned home. His patrol car was found abandoned near a remote canyon area, about 30 miles from the town. The driver's door was wide open, the engine still running, but there was no sign of Daniel anywhere nearby. His radio was silent, the flashlight on the passenger seat untouched. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. When his fellow officers realized something was wrong, they organized a massive search. Helicopters flew over the canyon, shining bright lights into the dark wilderness. Search dogs sniffed through the bushes and rocky crevices. Volunteers from the town joined the effort, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they called Daniel's name. They searched for days, weeks even, but no trace of him was found. There were no footprints leading away, no signs of a struggle, nothing to explain where or why he had disappeared. The townspeople were shocked. Daniel Mercer was a strong, healthy man, familiar with the dangers of the desert. He was well-trained and cautious. How could a man so prepared just disappear without a trace? Some believed he might have gotten lost or injured somewhere deep in the wilderness. Others whispered darker possibilities. Maybe he had seen something dangerous, something he wasn't supposed to see. Could he have been taken by someone who wanted to silence him? The mystery consumed the town. The local newspaper ran stories about the search, with headlines like "Officer Vanishes Without a Trace" and "Desert Mystery Deepens." Linda, Daniel's wife, became a symbol of hope and heartbreak. She waited by the phone every day, refusing to believe her husband was gone. She kept his uniform and badge locked safely in a drawer, and every night she would pray for a miracle. James, only 5 years old at the time, was too young to understand everything. He missed his father deeply but was told Daniel had gone away for work. As the years passed, the story of the disappearance became a part of the town's history, something people talked about with a mix of sadness and fear. Some older residents still believed the desert held secrets that might never be uncovered. As the days turned into months and months into years, the official investigation slowly faded. Without evidence, the case went cold. The police department closed the files, marking Daniel Mercer as missing, presumed dead. The canyon where his car was found became a place of silence and mystery, untouched and feared by many. Meanwhile, Linda raised James on her own, telling him stories about his father's bravery and kindness. She never gave up hope that one day Daniel might come back. But life had to go on. James grew up with a quiet determination in his heart, carrying the unanswered questions like a shadow. Daniel Mercer's disappearance was not just a headline. It was a wound in the heart of a family and a puzzle that no one could solve. The desert kept its secrets well, hiding the truth behind its vast cliffs and hidden trails. But little did anyone know that the story was far from over. That 30 years later, something remarkable would be discovered at the bottom of that very canyon, changing everything once again. James Mercer grew up carrying a deep hole in his heart. His father, Officer Daniel Mercer, had disappeared when James was just a small boy. For years, the story was something he only heard in fragments. A missing man, an abandoned patrol car, a canyon too dangerous to explore fully. But as James grew older, the emptiness inside him grew too. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was left unsaid, something waiting to be discovered. His father wasn't just gone, he was lost, and James was determined to find out what had happened. From a young age, James had always been curious and intelligent. He did well in school, but unlike other kids who dreamed about adventures or sports, James dreamed about his father. He studied the small town of Prescott and the desert surrounding it. He learned to read maps and track patterns. He listened to stories from old officers who had worked with Daniel, collecting memories like precious jewels. Some said Daniel was a good man, brave and kind. Others hinted at mysteries he might have uncovered, but no one had any real answers. At first, James thought his search would be simple. Maybe he would find a clue, a note, a sign that would explain everything. But the truth was far more complicated. The desert was a vast place, bigger and wilder than he had imagined. Over the years, James started visiting the canyon where his father's car was found. The place was beautiful and deadly. There were tall red cliffs, dry bushes, and rocky paths that twisted unpredictably. People warned him to stay away, saying it was dangerous terrain, but James didn't listen. The canyon held his father's story, and he had to find it. Every summer, James returned to the desert, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone. He hiked for hours, exploring areas that the police search teams had never reached. He looked for anything unusual, a piece of cloth, a broken tool, anything that might have belonged to his father. Over time, he found small things: a rusted belt buckle hidden beneath some rocks, a worn-out boot half buried in the sand. These little discoveries felt like signs, proof that he was on the right path. But they didn't tell the whole story. The deeper James went into the wilderness, the more he realized how much the desert had hidden. James kept a journal, writing down everything he saw and thought. He noted changes in the landscape, how the wind moved through the canyon, the tracks of animals, and sometimes humans. He also revisited old case files and police reports, searching for overlooked details. Some officers had retired, but James tracked them down, asking questions about his father's last shift. Many remembered Daniel as a dedicated man who cared deeply about justice. Some mentioned that Daniel had been working on a secret investigation before he disappeared, but no one would say what it was about. The mystery became an obsession. James's friends began to worry. He missed social events, family gatherings, and even work, always drawn back to the desert and his father's unsolved case. But James couldn't stop. Each clue, no matter how small, was a thread in the web he hoped to untangle. Every time he returned to Prescott, he talked to locals, hoping someone might remember something new. One summer, after a long day hiking near a dry riverbed, James noticed something strange in the dirt. A patch of scorched earth, blackened as if there had been a small fire. Nearby, he found shattered glass and fragments of metal. It looked like debris from a car accident. His heart raced. Was this part of the scene where his father's patrol car had disappeared? Could this be the spot the search teams missed? He marked the location on his map and spent the next few days carefully exploring the area. He took photos, collected samples, and sent them to experts to analyze. The burned ground told a story of heat and force. The metal fragments matched the type used in police vehicles. It was the closest he had come to proof that something had happened here. But still, the biggest question remained. Where was his, father? James also learned to use technology to help in his search. He started using drones to fly over the canyon, capturing images of areas too dangerous for him to explore by foot. These images revealed hidden caves, narrow crevices, and parts of the canyon that were invisible from above. It was exhausting work, but each flight brought him closer to understanding the landscape his father had faced. As the years passed, James became a man shaped by the mystery of his father's disappearance. His determination was fueled by love and a need for closure. He spoke at community meetings about the importance of never giving up on missing persons. His story inspired others who had lost family members to disappearances, and he began working with local organizations to improve search efforts. Despite his deep involvement, James struggled with his own emotions. Sometimes the search made him feel angry. Angry at the unknown forces that might have taken his father. Angry at the silence that surrounded the case. At other times he felt despair, fearing he might never find the truth. But in those moments, he remembered his father's courage and honor. He told himself that giving up was not an option. His father had been a protector, and now it was James's turn to protect his memory. In the background of all this, life went on. James built relationships, pursued education, and even started a family of his own. But the canyon was always there, a place of secrets and memories. Friends and family supported him, understanding that the search was part of who he was. They admired his strength and the way he turned pain into purpose. One day, during another summer hike, James decided to explore a section of the canyon he had never visited before. It was a steep and difficult path, full of loose rocks and shadows. The sun was high, and the desert air was dry and hot. But James felt a strange sense of calm, as if this part of the canyon was waiting for him. He climbed carefully, moving closer to the edge where the cliffs dropped sharply. As he looked down, he saw something unusual at the bottom of the canyon, a shape that did not belong to nature. It was metallic, dark, and covered in dirt, but it reflected the sunlight in a way that caught his eye. His heart beat faster. Could it be? Could this finally be what he had been searching for all these years? James prepared to make his way down carefully, knowing the climb would be dangerous, but he was ready. For 30 years, he had dreamed of this moment, imagining what he might find. The canyon held its breath as father and son stories moved closer to crossing paths once again. After years of searching, James Mercer found himself standing at the edge of a steep canyon cliff on a hot summer afternoon in 2015. The desert sun beat down fiercely, making the air shimmer with heat waves. This time, however, James felt something different. A strange mix of hope and nervous excitement. He wasn't just wandering the wilderness anymore. He was about to discover the truth that had eluded him for 30 long years. He carefully prepared his gear for the descent. The canyon was treacherous, with loose rocks and sharp drops that could send anyone tumbling. He strapped on his climbing harness and attached ropes to strong anchor points he had found earlier. His heart pounded in his chest as he started the slow, cautious climb down the jagged rocks. Each step required focus and patience. One wrong move could be fatal. But he was determined to reach the bottom, to see what lay hidden where no one had dared to search before. As he descended deeper into the canyon, the landscape grew wilder and quieter. The wind that blew at the top faded into stillness. The sun's rays struggled to reach the bottom where shadows stretched long and the air smelled of dust and old earth. The silence was almost overwhelming. James felt as if time had stopped in this hidden place, as if the canyon itself was holding its breath, waiting for a secret to be revealed. Suddenly, amidst the rocks and bushes, James saw a strange shape. At first it looked like a pile of rusted metal covered with dirt and tangled in dry branches. As he got closer, his heart raced with a mixture of fear and excitement. It was a car, a patrol car. The exact make and model matched the description of his father's vehicle from 1985. This was the moment James had dreamed of since childhood. The patrol car was battered and broken, as if it had fallen from the top of the cliff. Its paint was chipped and faded, and the glass windows were shattered long ago. Dust and sand had filled the interior, and vines and bushes had begun to grow around it, almost hiding it from view. But there was no mistaking it. This was the last place anyone had expected to find the missing officer's vehicle. James took a deep breath and carefully approached the car. The metal was sharp and jagged in places where it had been torn apart. The door on the driver's side was bent but still attached, and he could see the faint outline of a body inside. His hands trembled as he reached out and pushed the door open wider, stepping cautiously inside. What he saw next stopped him in his tracks. There, strapped into the driver's seat, lay skeletal remains, dressed in what looked like a police uniform. The bones were bleached white by years of sun and wind, but the uniform's badges and patches were still visible. James's heart broke as he realized this was his father, Daniel Mercer. Next to the remains lay a rusted, broken badge and a revolver. The gun was old but unmistakable, a classic model used by police officers at the time. James carefully picked it up, feeling the cold metal in his hand. It was as if the past had reached out to him through this small object. The discovery was overwhelming. For years, James had imagined this moment, but never expected it to be so real, so final. His father had been here all along, hidden away in this forgotten canyon, caught in a tragic accident or something worse. James sat beside the car for a long time, staring at the remains, trying to make sense of it all. How had Daniel ended up here? What had happened in the last moments of his life? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon floor, James began to explore the area around the car. He noticed tire tracks in the dusty soil leading up to the edge of the cliff. The tracks were deep and fresh enough to suggest the car had skidded or been forced off the road. Near the edge, he found broken pieces of glass and twisted metal, evidence of a crash. James also spotted signs of a struggle nearby. There were disturbed bushes, broken branches, and footprints in the dirt. The footprints were faded but seemed to lead away from the edge toward a narrow trail disappearing into the rocks. It was a difficult path, one that would have been nearly impossible to climb without help. He followed the trail carefully, looking for more clues. After a short distance, he found an old campfire circle with burnt wood and ashes. Near the fire were some scraps of cloth and a few empty bullet shells. The presence of the bullets startled James. Could his father have been involved in a shootout before the crash? James's mind raced as he tried to connect the pieces. Was his father chasing someone, or was he being chased? Was this an accident or something more sinister? The evidence suggested that Daniel's last moments were filled with fear and danger, not just a simple fall into the canyon. He took photos and collected samples of the items he found, knowing that experts would need to examine them later. With the remains of his father and these clues, James hoped to finally unlock the mystery that had haunted his family for 3 decades. After hours in the canyon, James prepared to climb back up. The weight of the discovery pressed down on him, but he felt a strange relief too. He now had answers, or at least a beginning. The canyon had given up its secret, and the truth was within reach. Back in town, James contacted local authorities and shared everything he had found. The police department reopened the cold case, bringing in forensic teams to investigate the site. They confirmed that the remains were indeed Daniel Mercer's. The discovery shook the community, bringing closure to a mystery that had haunted the town for so long. James stayed involved in the investigation, sharing his knowledge of the canyon and the clues he had uncovered. Together with the experts, he helped piece together the final moments of his father's life. The evidence suggested a deadly chase, possibly linked to criminal activities in the area at the time. The bullets, tire tracks, and signs of struggle pointed to a dangerous encounter before the fatal crash. As the investigation progressed, James found himself feeling closer to his father than ever before. The man who had vanished without a trace was now real to him in a way he had never imagined. He saw his father's courage, his dedication, and his sacrifice laid bare in the harsh desert landscape. The discovery also brought new questions. Who was involved in the chase? Were there others responsible for Daniel's death? These questions pushed James to continue searching, not just for answers, but for justice. Despite the pain, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. The canyon, once a place of mystery and loss, had become a place of connection and hope. He had finally found his father, not just in memory, but in the earth itself. The story of the vanished cop and his son's relentless search inspired many in the community. It reminded them of the power of love, persistence, and the need to never give up, even when hope seems lost. James's discovery was more than just the end of a long mystery. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where a son could finally say goodbye, honor his father's memory, and carry his legacy forward. After the discovery of his father's remains at the bottom of the canyon, James Mercer's life changed in ways he had never imagined. The truth about Daniel Mercer's fate was finally out, but the answers only led to more questions. The investigation reopened, and this time, with modern technology and forensic science, the police began to uncover new clues that had been hidden for decades. The local police, working with federal agencies, launched a thorough inquiry into the events leading to Daniel's disappearance and death. They examined every piece of evidence James had collected: the tire tracks, the bullet shells, the broken car, and the remains themselves. Using advanced techniques, experts analyzed the bones to determine the exact cause of death. It was confirmed that Daniel had suffered severe injuries consistent with a fall from a great height, but there were also signs of trauma from gunshot wounds. The discovery of bullet wounds was shocking. It meant that Daniel Mercer had been shot before his fatal fall, confirming suspicions that his death was not a simple accident. This revelation sent ripples through the small town of Prescott. People began to realize that the story was much darker than anyone had imagined. Daniel hadn't just vanished or gotten lost. He had been involved in a violent encounter. James found himself drawn deeper into the investigation. He worked closely with the police, sharing everything he knew about his father's last days and the clues he had found. The police also reopened old case files, searching for connections to criminal activity in the region during the mid-1980s. They discovered that Daniel had been investigating a drug trafficking ring that operated through the desert and nearby towns. This ring had evaded law enforcement for years, using the rugged landscape to hide their illegal activities. Further interviews with retired officers and locals revealed that Daniel had been getting close to exposing this group. He had gathered evidence, but the danger was real. It was possible that someone from the drug ring had confronted him, leading to the deadly shootout and the crash in the canyon. The police theorized that Daniel was ambushed while on patrol, forced off the road, and left to die in the remote wilderness. For James, these details were painful, but also empowering. His father had died trying to protect the community, fighting against crime even when it meant risking his own life. Knowing this gave James a sense of pride mixed with sorrow. The man he had lost was a hero, and his sacrifice was more meaningful than he had ever known. The investigation also brought new evidence to light. Using modern forensic techniques, the police were able to retrieve fingerprints and DNA samples from the patrol car and surrounding areas. These samples matched known criminals linked to the drug ring. This was the first solid proof connecting Daniel's death to a larger criminal conspiracy. James attended court hearings and helped identify suspects. The trial was a tense and emotional experience for the community. Witnesses spoke about the drug operations, the violence, and the fear that had gripped the town. James listened carefully, feeling the weight of his father's legacy. The men responsible for the crime were finally held accountable, thanks in large part to the evidence James had helped uncover. While the legal process brought some closure, James knew the healing was just beginning. He worked with support groups for families of missing and murdered persons, sharing his story and encouraging others to never lose hope. His journey had taught him that even the darkest mysteries could be solved with determination and love. At the same time, James focused on his own family. He wanted to honor his father's memory by being a good husband and father himself. The lessons he learned from Daniel, courage, honesty, and sacrifice, became the foundation of his own life. He told his children stories about their grandfather, making sure his legacy lived on through new generations. James also worked with the town to create a memorial near the canyon, dedicated to Daniel Mercer and all law enforcement officers who had lost their lives in the line of duty. The memorial became a place of reflection, respect, and remembrance for the community. Every year, families and officers gathered to pay tribute, sharing stories and keeping the memory alive. The discovery at the bottom of the canyon not only solved a decades-old mystery, but also brought the community closer together. It reminded everyone that heroes could be found in ordinary places, and that even in the face of tragedy, hope and justice could prevail. For James, the journey was far from over. He continued to seek truth and justice for other missing persons, inspired by the experience that had changed his life forever. He became an advocate for better search and rescue operations, improved communication between law enforcement agencies, and more support for families left behind. His story became a beacon of hope for many, showing that love and determination could overcome even the greatest obstacles. The canyon, once a symbol of loss and mystery, had transformed into a place of healing and courage. Though the pain of losing his father never fully disappeared, James found peace in knowing that Daniel Mercer's story was finally told. The vanished cop was no longer just a missing person. He was a man remembered for his bravery, his sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond between a father and son. The discovery of his father's remains and the reopening of the case brought James Mercer a mixture of emotions: relief, sorrow, pride, and a deep sense of responsibility. Now that the truth about Daniel Mercer's tragic fate was finally out, James knew his life had changed forever. But the journey to healing and justice was still ongoing, and he had a role to play far bigger than he ever imagined. After the trial of those responsible for his father's death, James realized that many families like his had been left without answers for far too long. The pain of losing a loved one to crime or disappearance was something he now understood deeply, and he wanted to help others find closure and hope. He began to travel around the country, speaking at conferences, support groups, and law enforcement gatherings. His story was powerful, not just because of the mystery and the discovery, but because of the courage and determination it took to never give up. James encouraged families of missing persons to keep searching, to hold on to hope, and to use every resource available to find the truth. At these events, James also met other people who had lost family members under similar circumstances. Some had stories even darker and more complicated than his. He listened to their pain and shared his own experiences, creating a network of support and understanding that stretched across states. Together, they pushed for better laws, improved search technologies, and more cooperation between agencies. One of the biggest challenges James saw was the lack of resources for families left behind. Often, police departments didn't have enough manpower or funding to continue long-term investigations, and families felt forgotten. James worked with lawmakers to create programs that provided financial aid, counseling, and legal support for these families. His advocacy helped bring about changes that made it easier for people to get the help they needed during their darkest hours. While his public work grew, James never forgot the personal side of his journey. At home, he made sure to keep his father's memory alive in simple but meaningful ways. He set up a small shrine in his house with photos, Daniel's badge, and the old revolver James had found. Each night, he would sit there quietly, talking to his father as if he were still present. It was a way to feel connected, to keep the bond strong across time and space. James's children grew up hearing stories about their grandfather, the brave cop who never gave up on justice. They learned about courage, sacrifice, and the importance of standing up for what is right. These lessons shaped them into compassionate and strong individuals who were proud of their family history. The memorial near the canyon became a place of gathering for families and law enforcement officers every year. On the anniversary of Daniel's disappearance, people would come from near and far to honor his memory. There were speeches, candlelight vigils, and moments of silence. James often spoke at these events, reminding everyone that remembering was a way to keep hope alive. The canyon itself, once a symbol of mystery and loss, began to change. It became a protected area, with signs warning visitors to be careful but also explaining the history of Daniel Mercer and the search that had lasted decades. Hikers who passed through would stop at the memorial, reflecting on the story of a father who disappeared and a son who never stopped searching. James also helped organize volunteer search teams to aid in finding other missing persons. Using his knowledge of tracking, terrain, and technology, he trained volunteers to work safely and effectively in dangerous areas like canyons and deserts. These teams brought hope to families who had no one else to turn to. Throughout all this, James's faith in humanity grew stronger. He saw that even in the darkest moments, people could come together to help one another. The kindness of strangers, the dedication of law enforcement, and the love of family were powerful forces that could heal wounds left by loss. Despite the progress, James sometimes struggled with moments of loneliness and sadness. He missed his father deeply and sometimes wondered what life would have been like if Daniel had come home that day in 1985. But those feelings never stopped him from moving forward. Instead, they reminded him why his work was so important. James also became involved in mentoring young people interested in law enforcement and search and rescue work. He shared his story to inspire them to approach their jobs with integrity, courage, and compassion. Many young officers looked up to him, not just for what he had done, but for how he turned his pain into purpose. As the years passed, James wrote a book about his journey, about loss, hope, and the relentless search for truth. The book touched many hearts and helped spread awareness about missing persons cases. Readers found comfort in James's honesty and were inspired by his unwavering determination. Looking back, James knew that finding his father's remains was just the beginning. The real journey was about what came after, about justice, healing, and making a difference. Daniel Mercer's story was no longer just about a vanished cop. It was about the power of love between a father and son, and the strength to keep searching even when the world seemed to have forgotten. In the end, James found peace not just in answers, but in the legacy his father left behind. A legacy of bravery, sacrifice, and hope that would live on through him and everyone touched by their story.